News when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Matt Piper. That's your closing bell on Wall Street as hopes for a diplomatic way out of the war in the Middle East drove stocks away from session lows. The Dow down 85 points, or nearly 0.2%. The Nasdaq gained 22, or 0.1%. The S&P up 5 points, or nearly 0.1%. 10-year Treasury yield is at 4.3%. Two-year yield at 3.8%. Brent crude down 3%, or about $107 a barrel. West Texas oil down 1% at about $111. Pakistan's Prime Minister is requesting that President Trump extend his deadline for 8 p.m. tonight by 2 weeks. That comes hours after Trump threatened that a whole civilization will die tonight if Iran fails to meet his latest deadline to strike a deal that includes reopening the Strait of Hormuz. Trump's expansive threat did not seem to account for potential harm to civilians. His threat, though, has lawmakers slamming his online post. Democrat Senator Peter Welch.
I think the president is really unhinged. You know, the Ayatollahs are the problem. The people of Iran are not. And when the president is posting about destroying an entire civilization, that is unhinged. And if he was really serious about doing that, that's a war crime.
Senator Welch on ABC. Republican Senator Ron Johnson.
I am hoping and praying that President Trump this really is bluster. I do not want to see us start blowing up civilian infrastructure. I do not want to see that. We are not at war with the Iranian people. You know, we are trying to liberate them.
Senator Johnson on the John Solomon Reports podcast. It's not just politicians. Pope Leo says the threat is truly unacceptable. Vice President Vance is in Hungary meeting with Prime Minister Viktor Orban and says the U.S. is confident it will receive a response from Iran by the president's deadline.
I hope they make the right response, because what we really want is we want a world where oil and gas is flowing freely, where people can afford to heat their homes and cool their homes, where people can afford to transport themselves to work. That's not going to happen if the Iranians are engaged in acts of economic terrorism.
The Trump administration seeks to keep Orban in power, despite opinion polls showing he could be ousted in elections this weekend after 16 years in office. The International Monetary Fund is poised to cut its forecast for global growth due to the war in Iran. The IMF chief says the world is less prepared to respond to a major economic downturn with weaker tools and depleted policy space. Chicago Fed President Austin Goolsbee says that the low hire, low fire economy is due to uncertainty.
I think the job market is basically stable, but not great. Unusual in that there's very low hiring, which feels like a recession, but there's very low layoffs, which normally is the opposite of a recession. So it's a strange for those both to be happening at the same time. I think it's from uncertainty.
Goolsbee at a Detroit Economic Club event also says that the low hiring rate for new grads is not a result of AI. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy says he thinks there's room for some mergers in the U.S. aviation industry.
If there was a merger between some of the larger airlines, they're going to have to peel off some of their assets, right? We don't want to have, this massive infrastructure with one airline in America. Again, I think that will affect pricing in the long run because there'll be a lack of competition, which we love competition. So I'm not going to pre-commit to anything. I'll look at whatever comes across my desk. Another president will look at that as well.
Duffy on CNBC. His comments come as airlines are grappling with higher jet fuel prices due to the ongoing war. It could lead to airlines that are better positioned to absorb the higher costs, acquiring those that are struggling. Delta today following United and JetBlue in raising prices for checked bags. Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche held his first news conference today since taking over for Pam Bondi, who was fired by President Trump last week. He says there's no bad blood with Bondi.
I did not ask for this job. I love working for President Trump. It's the greatest honor of a lifetime. And if President Trump chooses to keep me as acting, that's an honor. If he chooses to nominate me, that's an honor.
The world's largest record label could have a new buyer. Bloomberg's Monica Ricks has those details.
Shares of Universal Music Group soared 11% today, the most in more than 3 years, thanks to billionaire Bill Ackman's bid to buy the label in a $65 billion cash and stock offer. That deal would merge UMG with Ackman's Pershing Square holdings and force a U.S. stock listing, which Ackman claims would dramatically boost the company's value, especially with the likes of Taylor Swift, Bad Bunny, and Drake on its roster. Universal isn't commenting, but any deal would require a majority vote from shareholders to happen. Monica Ricks, Bloomberg Radio.
PepsiCo is slashing prices by up to 15% on some salty snacks after sales at Frito-Lay plunged and the company missed internal revenue targets for 2 years in a row. Some of its chips like Doritos cost more than $7 a bag. At Walmart, Doritos prices had jumped nearly 50% from 2021. That's according to Attain, which tracks consumer spending data. That's news when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Matt Piper, and this is Bloomberg.